Can anybody see me right now? Anybody in the chat? Let me pop out. Cough, cough, cough. See who we can get in this stream. See if we can get anybody. Hello, new skin, yeah. Don't worry, that's for personal use. I'm not gonna be talking about stocks in this live stream. Don't worry. But can you hear me fine? Hey Diego, how are you? Hi Diallo. Can you guys hear me okay? Testing, hello. Yes, you can hear me. All right, cool. Cool, let's just get a couple people here and I'm gonna make this the first Bagration Power Hour. You know, we have quite a few topics to talk about today and they're all related and pertinent to the channel. So I know I don't make many videos. It's not on purpose. I'm not trying to leave you guys in the dark. It's because making my videos is hard as hell. It's so time consuming making YouTube videos and I make almost nothing out of it. But I like doing it because I like entertaining you guys and I love talking about Russia. To give you guys a rough idea, one video, if I were doing it like full time, would take me probably 3 weeks to do. A full 10.5 minute video, you know, with the animations and everything stuff. I'm weird if I'm interested in medieval battles. Naval battles. In the Middle Ages, they weren't that common, really. If I recall. I have a book on naval warfare in the Dark Ages, in the early medieval ages. From the Roman times up until like the 9th century. I started reading it a bit, but I left it back in the Czech Republic, so I haven't had a chance to really, you know, I was just reading it for fun, and I can't really remember too much. I do know that they did explain about the raids that the Romans did in late antiquity, but you know, so that's it. So yeah, sorry for leaving everyone in the dark with my kind of the lack of video production. But right now I am studying accountancy and I pretty much nearly have a full-time job and I'm studying full-time. So you can imagine, you know, minus and minus doesn't, I mean, it does equal plus, but sorry, that was a really bad reference. But I just don't have time. You just found my channel this morning. Welcome, newcomer, to the cult of Blitz. And you watched all the Bagration videos, so that's a good point to start on. Obviously, I'm gonna continue the Bagration series, but I'm at the point where pretty much I wrote the script for Bagration about a year and a half ago, with some modifications, obviously. But I'm getting to the point where I've nearly used up all that script in the first 3 parts, so I need to go into like my research phase, even though I've pretty much researched everything regarding Bagration, just to add some like little details here and there and stuff. So part 4 hopefully will be around this summer. I can't guarantee it. At this rate, I'm trying to produce at least twice a year. That sounds horrible. But sorry for coughing so much. I think it's hay fever. I'm moving back to France, presumably in a few months, and I'll have more time to I'll have more time to produce a Bagration video series, and hopefully I can boost it up to like 4 or 5 videos a year, 20 minutes. I said 20. Fake news. Thank you. Thank you, Green. So Diego writes, I'm wearing I am weird if I like the Crusader Kings mod when the world stopped making sense and see it as a theme that can be used to enjoy the Great Migration period. God, I can't remember the Great Migration period. Is that like the Indo-European migration that you're referring to? Or are you referring to some of the other countless migrations? Did I remember to delete my internet history today? I think I remembered. So so like Roman imperial migration period. So like the barbarian invasions, essentially. That's what you're referring to. The Great Bagration period, exactly. Hey Evan, welcome to the chat. I like how you pronounce every European word wrong in your videos. I do that on purpose. Seat. I speak actually 3 languages. Oui, je parle français parce que ma copine est française, mais c'est pas les meilleures françaises du monde. Parce que j'habitais à côté d'Agen, in the village of Francis Cabral. Yes, but I do speak French. My French is like B2. It's not like perfectly fluent. It is quite fluent, but it could improve, especially with the vocabulary. Diego, you're not weird to think that, because North Africa was part of the Roman sphere for a very long time. You have the Carthaginians and Numidians and stuff. So like North African history is quite important, especially regarding the history of Christianity. You have Perpetua of Carthage in the 2nd, 3rd century AD, who was like one of the early martyrs of the Roman Catholic Church. So, well, I'm not gonna say Roman Catholic, but she was one of the early martyrs of the early Christian Church. So it's obviously very important. We just don't see it, I guess, because recent North African history doesn't interest me too much. I mean, you have the Algerian War, you have the Barbary pirates and stuff, but other than that, I can't really think of such interesting episodes. And I don't mean that in such a bad way. But yeah, I don't speak Bosnian. I've been to Bosnia. So, I do speak 3 languages. And a bit of Czech. And a little tiny bit of German. The reason is when I'm speaking English, I'm obviously pronouncing things with an English accent. I'm not trying to be obnoxious and pronouncing things like... I'm not going to say croissant. Even though I speak French, I'm going to say croissant, because it's how English speakers say it, and it's natural to the language. So when people complain about me saying Bagration, I know it's Bagration or whatever, but I will say that when I'm speaking Russian. When I'm speaking Russian, I will gladly say Bagration because it flows with the rhythm of the language. But Bagration, it's out of place, in my opinion. Like, my last name, Portuguese last name, I'm not going to pronounce it like a Portuguese person when I'm speaking English. English has phonics rules, just like any other language. Does that make sense? Do you think Romanians and Polish had... Honestly, when it comes to the Warsaw Pact, Diego, I really don't care too much about the military buildup. Carl Weiser disagrees with you. I don't care about the military buildup. I care more about the diplomacy. So I analyze really, for example, Romania's kind of sovereign foreign policy. I look at maybe the revolutions in the late 80s, especially in the Baltic. I look at those things. So I don't really analyze military strength. I leave that to World War II. It's not so interesting to me. English does make sense when it comes to how it's written and how it's read. The thing is, Tank's Encyclopedia, it's not as obvious as other languages. Like, for example, Czech, very phonetically friendly language. Every word, vowel, consonant is pronounced the way it's written. Same with Spanish. But English, the thing is, English is a mixture of many phonetic systems. So you have some words, English words that are Germanic, that follow like a more Germanic phonic system. Then you have other words that follow a more French phonic system, and etc., etc. But you just learn to, to live with it. Green, don't be offended to him. Toward him. I prefer the Welsh and Celts overall over Anglo-Saxons. Okay, this chat is very weird now. Someone's talking about erotic tanks and stuff. Yes, there are exceptions. Tanks Encyclopedia, for example, you have words that... For example, I actually taught English today. The word... pave. I'm going to write it in the chat. Pave has a long A sound, which sounds like rain, so it's a long A, and it has a silent E in the end. So it's a regular, it has a regular pattern. Words that are like knave, I hope I spelled that right, cave. All these words follow the same long A sound, the A, like in the word rain. However, you have words like have, which are irregular, which don't follow this. Even though have has the same spelling. Yeah, rave, exactly. Rave is regular. So you should really distinguish between regular and irregular words. Okay? Now, I'm going to get started with today's topics. I've already kind of opened it with what I'm doing with Bagration and stuff like that. So let's get into it. First thing I'm going to address today is the the medieval buildings video on Russia. That triggered a ton of Russians. The comment section got pretty ugly. Yeah, I pulled the ban off. It's because I'm an English teacher. Even though I do mispronounce certain words like subsequent, I know that. When I said it, annals instead of annals in the video on Jewish influence in the Bolshevik Revolution, I mispronounced that. I get it. But that's because these are words that I only really expose myself to in writing and not speaking. You don't... If someone's using the word annals of history to you in real life, like they're being very pompous, I know, I gotta stay hydrated. I have some hot cocoa or something. I have actually oval malt or whatever they call. But yeah, exactly. I don't care. People make fun of me. Like, jokes on them. Like, I'm not the type of person to get offended. Like, I have thick skin. No, don't sweat it, Seat. It is what it is, man. I'm used to just getting criticism online or like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't care. It's okay. Everything's fine. All right, so we're gonna talk about the medieval Russia video, or medieval Rus for my Ukrainians out there, on regarding the lack of medieval buildings in Russia today, right? And a lot of Russian speakers, a lot of Russian viewers kind of got offended by that, or at least they would be the Euro pronunciation. Sure, like Bagration, okay. Kievan Rus. Do you want me to like exaggerate my Russian accent? I'll try better. Yeah, Kievan Rus, yes. So a lot of Russian speakers complain, saying that no, you're not telling the truth. There are medieval buildings in Russia. Of course there are. Like, I'm not saying there aren't. Okay, bruh. I won't import it, I promise. I won't. It's good, man. This is like Caribbean drink or whatever, like, it tastes good. Anyway, there are medieval buildings in Russia. There are Kremlins. But my issue with that is that my premise still holds. Like, in Florida, there is the fort of, I think, San Marco. in St. Augustine, which is the oldest city in the U.S. But that doesn't mean that the average building in Florida is going to be from the 17th century. It doesn't even mean that a quarter of the buildings in Florida will be of the 17th century. Meaning that the probability of encountering such buildings in your daily life is actually really low. And that's the same case in Russia. The fact that Russian speakers, had to provide like a list of specific Kremlins, right? And had to like tell me, oh, these are the buildings we have, kind of proves my point. When I lived in France, and I'm sure bro would agree with me, especially in the countryside, anywhere you go, you can find a building that's literally over 300, 400 years old very easily, extremely easily. You don't have to go far, so you can find it in your daily life, unless you're living maybe in Paris, where the city was reorganized in the 18th and 19th century. But in the French countryside, it's very prevalent. In my video specific to the medieval buildings argument, I included I included footage of old French buildings that I just decided to take around where I lived, kind of just to prove the point. So people would talk about the Kremlin in Moscow, the Novgorod Kremlin, Nizhny Novgorod Kremlin, Pskov Kremlin, etc., etc. All these Kremlins, virtually all of them, were constructed in at least after Kievan Rus, after the Mongols nearly. They were constructed in the 15th, usually in the late 15th century, but most of them were actually constructed in the 16th century. That's not really medieval to me. Anything from the mid 15th century onward is more like Renaissance and the early modern period. So when I'm talking about medieval, I'm really talking about, the 5th, 6th century to the early 15th century. Around the time of the end, when the 100 Years' War ends, or Constantinople falls. That's usually the timeline I'm given. Obviously, people will say, well, Moscow they started building it, like, I think in the 14th century, blah, blah, blah. The thing is, a lot of it is not really in its original state from that time. I have a friend who's Russian. She was showing me pictures near her town, which is near Tver, and I was telling her, oh, that's really cool. It's a wooden building. And she's like, yeah, we're here. It's a history about Kievan Rus and stuff. And I'm like, but isn't that a reconstruction? And she's like, yes, it is a reconstruction. And that kind of elaborates on my point. So really, giving a list of Kremlins doesn't really do anything to challenge my argument, especially that a lot of the castles in Russia and the monasteries are actually in the western part of Russia, like Kaliningrad, the Baltic, like Pskov. Scythian Girls War, I have no idea, man. I have no idea, man. I'm a 1990s baby. I'm not a first century AD baby, but that's a different story. So, a lot of the castles that you find in Russia are primarily of Teutonic origin, like that were built by the Teutonic Knights, and the Teutonic Knights were it was a feudal society because it was more Central Western European. I have the impression that a lot of my Russian speakers think, oh, feudalism equals medieval European identity, and they try to conflate the Kievan economic system with that of Western and Central Europe in the medieval period, because it's a synonym to Western identity, I feel. But it's the case where Kievan Rus really was not medieval at all. Feudal at all. It was more like Jeffrey Hoskins says. It was more like the ancient Greek system. For example, the serfs in Kievan Rus, called the Smerd. See, there's my pronunciation, Euro pronunciation. The Smerd were primarily free peasants. They could own their land and stuff like that. You did have some Kievan princes who did own like estates, where I believe they had like indentured contracts of bondage with peasants. So in that case, those peasants were like maybe they owed a debt. Maybe, I don't know. It's usually to do with debt. But these cases weren't the majority. Most peasants in Kievan Rus were free. They lived in their forest villages, you know, kind of like the people living in the villages in Barbarians and stuff. So that's a little bit of a myth, in my opinion, that Kievan Rus was feudal. Maybe if you go to Volhynia, yeah. I'm not going to get into that green. Maybe if you go to Volhynia, however you pronounce it, which is like Western Ukraine, you'll find more the remnants of feudal society, because it was parallel to Hungary. You know, it was right next to Hungary and Poland, you know? So Poland and Hungary were more feudal than Kievan Rus. Kievan Rus isn't feudal at all, man. Like, it was started, think about it, the ruling class, as they say, of Kievan Rus was the descendants of Vikings from, like, Scandinavia. Yeah. Volhynia is Poland, but it's also, like, Western Ukraine. There's a place there. Yeah, the ones you're talking about are in the Riga area. Because the thing is, that was all part of the Teutonic Order. That was more feudal in its nature. Yeah, Virgin City-States versus Chad. I'm not... Okay. That meme, I've already heard that meme so many times, but so the ruling class of Kievan Rus was supposedly descendants of Viking raiders, well, Danish raiders, right? That would raid the Dnieper and the Volga, and they would create trade networks with the Middle East, with the Byzantines especially. That's what they were primarily doing, trading jewelry, gold, fur especially, because that part of Russia, the northwestern part of Russia, has a lot of fur. There was like fertility in regard to the agriculture, but it was not the primary crop. And I think if I want to use my accounting knowledge as sort of like an analogy, think of it like a manufacturing company and a service company. I didn't see that movie. Sorry, Eporedorix. Sorry. I've seen you before my comments. Thank you for your nice comments. You too, Diego. Kings and Generals is okay, but they've still like that's true. Some people just surrendered. Novgorod also kind of surrendered as well to the Mongols. They just they were spared. That was probably Novgorod. Novgorod surrendered. They escaped the clutches of the Mongols. That's why they kind of retained their independence. Because Moscow really didn't come into... Like, Moscow was a trading outpost at this point. It didn't really develop into a city until the Mongol period. So Moscow, the predecessor of Russia, really came about during the Mongol period. So, like, the 14th century. Before that, it wasn't really around. When are you gonna visit me in Italy, gringo sir? I've been to Italy so much because my girlfriend, she's half Italian. So it depends where you are in Italy. Like, I love traveling around Europe. So so I don't mind at all, you know. I've tried doing little, like, I've always been like, hey, I'm here in this city if anyone wants to meet. But I don't think my my subscription base is large enough to really, like, have people respond to that. So I just do it because, like, whatever. I'm being nice. So going back to Kievan Rus, the ruling class, they're the descendants of warriors that would take tribute from people. They're not the descendants of like agricultural experts. Like, you know what I mean? So like obviously, like, if you combine that with the trade networks that were established with the Byzantines, the large navigable rivers, and the forests that didn't even support widespread agriculture except in the south in Ukraine, then you obviously get a system that doesn't really function around agriculture. And going back to my analogy, think of it like this: manufacturing companies and service companies. A manufacturing company is a company that produces goods. It usually needs machine, equipment, these things that you buy in order to produce the goods. Whereas service companies, maybe like a store, they buy the goods from a wholesaler and then they resell the goods for a markup, for a higher markup. Think of like Foot Locker, Nike. So they get someone to make the goods, they buy the goods from the suppliers, they resell them. Think of Kievan Rus acting almost like a service. Hello. Think of Kievan Rus acting almost like a retail company, like a Foot Locker, Nike. And think of like feudalism in Europe being more like manufacturing. Like when you have feudalism, you have like your assets, your equipment is tied to the land, right? It's like you're producing, where you're producing a product. Whereas Kievan Rus was really just a place where goods would be efficiently redistributed, right? So like instead of buying from a supplier and selling, the Kievan princes would they would ask for tribute, and then the Varangians would pillage, and it would funnel through to an intermediary and then go to a customer, the Byzantines or something. So that's kind of how it worked in a way, from an accounting perspective. Slovenia. Okay, so let me just read the comments now. Stary Oksol is now more populated than Veliki Novgorod, and Bryansk is more populated than Smolensk. It is a bit weird because, like, Smolensk, I always felt, since it has such a central role in Russian history, whether you're talking about the Kievan principalities, whether you're talking about, like, Hitler's route to Moscow, Napoleon's route to Moscow, not Operation Bagration too much. You'd think that it would be a bigger city, but it's actually not. So it's really interesting to me. But Kings and Generals, to recap, Green, Kings and Generals, they did, I don't know how I feel about them because they made a video on the Battle of Austerlitz and they kind of gave incorrect information regarding the Russian troops who drowned supposedly in the pond when they were retreating, even though there's no evidence to support that. It's a myth. The next spring after the Battle of Austerlitz, the French didn't really find, or at least the Austrians, I can't remember who, but the corpses weren't really found in the pond. And even then, the pond wasn't even that deep. And also there's an eyewitness account by a French officer who said that, like, nobody drowned in the ponds by Austerlitz. Okay? Greece only fell because Britain gave up early in World War II. That's not my area of expertise, so I can't get into it. So, here's another rebuttal for the medieval video. People say, oh, Russia got destroyed by wars, you had the Mongols, you had World War I, World War II, Napoleon, all this jazz and stuff. But what about Central Europe? What about the 100 Years' War? What about World War I in northern France? What about, the Italian wars, What about Poland? I mean, that's not a good example. But the point is, other parts of Europe have also felt war just as much as Russia, but in different time periods, you know? London had a fire in the 17th century that destroyed most of the buildings. That being said, not all of Russia was equally touched by war. Like, Novgorod escaped the grasps of Mongol domination because they submitted themselves to the Mongols. Therefore, Novgorod wasn't sacked like Kiev in, I believe, 1239 or 49. I can't remember the specific date. So, you know, the whole excuse of the Mongols, World War I, World War II is a bit, I don't really buy it. Because, you know, the Soviets, they did topple some synagogues and churches, but they didn't destroy buildings just to destroy buildings. Even for a communist, I find that hard to believe, that they would just be destroying buildings instead of just transforming them. You know, it's just a waste, you know? So, and here's my last rebuttal. Actually, no, here's another one. Someone stated that Russia didn't produce enough stone in the medieval period to warrant the construction of stone dwellings. So again, someone's completely contradicting other people. But the issue is Russia actually produces a large amount of stone today. So, you know, hold on, I'm just going to take this off. Okay, so they produce a large amount of stone today. So I don't know. I don't believe that. And finally, my statistics on the average climate of Russia are obviously including Siberia, but Western Russia is still a continental climate. The winters are still very cold, especially compared to Western Europe. So the reason I kept that statistic, even though I'm including Siberian average temperatures, is because it's not going to make a difference. You know what I mean? Like, Western Russia is still very cold. I guarantee you, if you're in Western Europe and you go type in a Russian city, I'm going to do that now, I guarantee you it's going to be colder than your Western European city, unless you're typing in summer, because continental climates mean that, like, in summer, the temperature's really, really warm. Now, right now in Moscow, it's 11 degrees Celsius. In London, UK, it's 7 degrees, but that makes sense because London is a maritime climate, so it's always temperate all year round, whereas we're in April. We're getting toward, we're near summer. But, you know, like, it's gonna snow kind of a bit in Moscow on Thursday, so, you know, like, who cares? All right, does anybody have any questions before we move on? Do you know during World War II that Warenkova, Beria, and Ordzhonikidze? Well, Ordzhonikidze died before World War II, Diego. He died, I think, in 1936. Supposedly, I think he killed himself, but I wouldn't rule out that, like, he lost favor and was probably a victim of one of the Great Purges. So let me put Ordzhonikidze. Yeah, he died in 1937. Yeah, some old Bolsheviks think that he was murdered. Yeah, and some people think he just killed himself. So, but I think Mikoyan was Mikoyan not like I forgot his name. Mikoyan, was he not like oh, he was Armenian, sorry. Maybe I'm thinking about, I'm not thinking about Mikoyan, sorry, 'cause Kaganovich, was Jewish, that I know. Lazar. Let me see. The death of Stalin cast, because it's definitely one of them. Let me check here. See you, Green. Thanks for visiting. Be sure to check out the full stream, because I'm going to also cover other stuff. Beria, Molotov, Malenkov. No, Malenkov was, no. Yeah, Mikoyan. Yeah, that's who I was thinking about, Mikoyan. But Mikoyan was Armenian, so it makes sense because of the yan suffix. So I was close. So let's go ahead. Can you guys still hear me fine? Is my sound palpable to all? Kind of like serfdom? Is anybody even here? Oh, you're here. Oh, hello. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do... yeah, those were the only high-ranking Georgians. Yeah, you're right. I haven't really analyzed the ethnic composition of the Politburo or like the the high-ranking Soviet officials, apart from Mikoyan, Armenian, Beria, Georgian, Ordzhonikidze, Georgian, and stuff like that. So maybe it's the fact that Georgia was so against joining the Soviet Union, Soviet Russia. It was a very large Menshevik stronghold, actually. So maybe that could be the reason why we don't see that many Georgians. A bit of discrimination because of ideology. Who knows? So now we're going to go ahead. We've covered all that. Bagration, pronunciation, everything. Now I'm going to talk about a really cool concept that I'm working on for a new video. I'm just going to touch it briefly because it's a very complicated topic. Pretty much it's to do with some statistics that I came up with in Bagration Part 3. If you've seen Bagration Part 3, a lot of it has to do with economics. It's obviously condensed because I can't fit the whole economic argument in the span of 10 minutes. But a lot of it has to do especially with Lend-Lease, where I provide a couple of facts and figures showing the extent to which Lend-Lease contributed to the Soviet victory in Operation Bagration. I have to be a bit honest with that. And I got into an argument with a subscriber named called SPICYBLITZ about one of my sources regarding the kind of contributions that Lend-Lease did. Let me show you here. Regarding the net income, the proportion of exports to net income. So I'm just here in my channel right here. And if you go here, okay, I'm just going to put this here. I'm not going to put the advertisement. Why do people hate Russia so much? Hey, Red Napoleon. I think people, they don't really hate Russia, even though a lot of people do conflate the Russian people with their government, and I don't like it, especially when some of my fellow Americans do that. It's precisely because Russia, it's a country that I feel tries to act Western, but it hasn't really encapsulated a lot of the values espoused by the Enlightenment in terms of separation of powers, in terms of just, it's never really had a chance at like full democratic participation of the people. If you think about the February Revolution, it lasted only a few months before problems arose. Like the provisional government, which it wasn't by any means a full democracy, but at least you had a multi-party system. Whereas, like, you know, you had the Bolsheviks take over, and then, like, it went back to square one. So Russia hasn't really had a chance at developing. I don't really think it's that, honestly. It's one of the last powers not to kneel before a Western power. I think it's, I don't know, to me that's really like, it could be true because the West has viewed Russia since the end of the Cold War in a very patronizing manner. Like, there's supposedly an incident where Yeltsin was actually inquiring with the Clinton administration about joining NATO, and kind of like the Clinton administration kind of laughed at them, you know? Yes, there is anti-Soviet propaganda, but some of it is justified, some of it isn't. Like, the propaganda against Stalin is completely justified. Khrushchev was honestly the point in Soviet history where the country went from being totalitarian to authoritarian. So honestly, Khrushchev, you know, I don't like the Soviet Union that much, but he even though he probably participated in the Great Purges, he did a very good thing in kind of liberalizing the country, trying to modernize the party apparatus by encouraging the rotation of political positions and encouraging a new leadership to take place. That's part of the reason why he was overthrown by Brezhnev, who was an ultra-conservative, because a lot of people were tired of Khrushchev trying to introduce these new ideas, you know, the Virgin Lands campaign, trying to get the party rotation, the rotation of the party leadership. People did not like that. That's why we went to the Brezhnev period, which was a period of really stagnation, as they call it. You know, Gorbachev did the same thing as Khrushchev, but he was under more pressure because the Soviet Union was suffering through a lot of long-term economic ailments. Like, there was not enough food was being produced in the Soviet Union for it to sustain itself, so it had to rely more and more on imports. The military budget was outrageously high. They were spending a ridiculous amount of money on anti-alcohol campaigns because vodka use was apparent. That's true, Michael. I will agree with you. That is very true that the West has a very condescending view of Russia, very simplified view of Russia, because Russia is such a diverse country. There are so many ethnic groups in Russia that you shouldn't really characterize Russians in a certain way. That being said, they do have a way of thinking that's very strange to the West. I get it because I studied Russian politics. It's very like there's a bit of paternalism. Sorry, there's a bit of a paternalistic kind of structure to Russia. Yeah, and Andropov just died as well. That created a mess, man. Like Andropov, Chernenko. Let me see, Chernenko as well died as well. Yeah. Chernenko, Andropov, like, it was a mess, man. It was a mess. You Polish, Alex? You Polish? I'm assuming you're Polish. I don't know. Don't take that in a bad way. Okay, so regarding here, this is a statistic I gave about trucks. And Simplicius argued that no, the proportion of trucks was much lower. The West only gave about, like, I don't know, this many trucks compared to this amount of Soviet trucks. And I find it hard to believe. Like, let's look here. Here, see? So he told me that about 600,000 trucks in the Soviet Red Army. This seems like he's taking the total amount of Soviet trucks, whereas he's sort of taking the yearly imports of US trucks, Whereas I feel a better measurement would be if you were to add all these imports together, and you'd get 307,000, which is still lower than this amount, which is actually 425,000. If you add this and this, you get about 426. So the issue is he started criticizing Richard Sakwa on these figures, saying, oh, he's just a Western historian. He says everything bad about Russia. Main issue, he's actually using a U.S. government source. Yeah, that's... I don't know too much about the Soviet trucks that were produced in the 1920s, but a lot of the new trucks from the West, the Studebaker trucks, were used with Katyushas. I think that's enough evidence to show how the extent that the trucks were, how much they contributed. So that's one thing. And then he also argues right here about this map. It's a bit inaccurate because I used a 1989 research paper by Mark Harrison that was subsequently updated in 1993 after the Soviet archives were opened and new information was given. This is the net imports as a percent of national income. National income, if you think about it, because I've studied economics, but I'm not like an expert in the subject, it's pretty much the combined kind of like value of the things produced of all like the nationals in from the Soviet Union, pretty much abroad or in the Soviet Union. Now, in my argument, I stated that national income can be kind of conflated with GDP, gross domestic product, which is the value of the yearly, production value, sort of like that. Because the Soviet Union was a very insulated economy. You didn't really have Soviet industry abroad, that would significantly inflate this number. So you could really treat GDP and national product or national income or whatever you call it as kind of the same thing. And in Mark Harrison's book, he kind of states this. So I said this before his book, Gerontocracy. What is that? Oh, by Old Ben. Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that word. Interesting. Sorry, I'm coughing so much. So, this figure was the net imports of the USSR, percent of national income. This is a net figure, so this takes into account depreciation of goods and stuff like that. I'm gonna get into it more in the future video. So he gives a new figure. This is an email by him. He gives a new figure. This is a script that I wrote. He gives a new figure that actually lowers this amount to about 10% gross. So pretty much it's saying that about 10% of net national income or GNP or whatever you call it was imported, mainly from the United States and Great Britain. So 10% of the economic production, I'm oversimplifying it. But the issue with his book in 1993 is that this is a gross figure. This does not factor in depreciation of equipment in Russia, for example. It does not factor in depreciation of everything. So when we factor in appreciation, see, if we take the previously mentioned gross national product of 220.3, I think this is million, and subtract it, these are rubles, by the way, I believe, by the depreciation, so the value, the decrease in the value of the capital stock in the equipment, we get 208.6. Now, you might think that's not such a huge difference. It isn't. But if we take the net import value of 22.9 million rubles, I believe, for 1944 and divide it by the net national product figure, we get the Lend-Lease aid actually being, as a proportion of the actual value of the capital stock and the country's national product. When we factor in depreciation, it's actually 10.97%. So it's actually a bit higher than the 10% figure that he states in his accounting book. And I asked him about this, and I kind of, verified. Russia is worth 75 trillion in natural resources. Michael, think of GDP as a yearly figure. It's not the total wealth of a country. The 75 trillion in natural resources is like the total value of the wealth, probably like since inception. GDP is just yearly. So it's kind of like the growth rate in a way. So like, if you look at national wealth figures, list of countries by national wealth, from Wikipedia, you'll get like the U.S., for example, is $105 trillion. Russia is actually, I think, $3 trillion, right? I think that's, $3 trillion. Let me just 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. 0, 0, 0. Yeah, 3.052 trillion, I think. If you click on Russia, actually, pretty much think of it like a balance sheet. I'm going to teach you guys a bit of the basics of accounting. Very basics. Let's go on Apple. It's a stock. We're gonna go on Yahoo, right? Whoa. Wow. Jesus. Thank you so much, Red Napoleon. Wow. I'll answer that question right after I just do this quick analogy, if you don't mind. So, I know you don't mean that, but I'm just going to explain this. The balance sheet of a company tells us about what the company owns, right? Think of national wealth as telling people what a country owns. It also, let me put that out. It also tells people what a country owes, like the debt it owns. So this is like the balance sheet of a country is kind of like a balance sheet of a company. Russia's balance sheet is low, maybe because it owns the resources, but it hasn't really transformed these resources into like an asset. So that's probably why it has 75 trillion in national resources, but it hasn't actually transformed the resources, so it can't really be considered as like the country owning the resources. Like the resource isn't producing anything unless it's excavated. So if we go back to Apple, and we click on Yahoo Finance again, financials, let's go to the income statement. The income statement in a company tells us how much the company is producing every year, right? It tells us how much it's making. So the balance sheet tells us what the company owns and owes, like the property, like a country, the total wealth. And the income statement tells us what the company is making and what it's losing in terms of profit. Think of GDP in my opinion, as the income statement. It's telling us how much the country's producing, how much is losing in money, things like that. That's the best analogy that I can come up with, if that makes sense. Michael. Natural resource wealth doesn't go into those figures. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. At least that's what I think. Because it's hard to quantify unless, like... The thing is, GDP, I believe, equals, like, the income and the expenses that the country has, you know. If people aren't spending the money on that natural wealth, it's not counted. All right, going to Red Napoleon's question. Thank you so much for that donation. I really appreciate that. That's the first time someone's donated on chat, so maybe that's a good idea. So what's your opinion on the 5-year plan? Now, are you talking, which 5-year plan are you referring to specifically? Are you referring to the first 5-year plan? Let me go into the 5-year Soviet 5-year plans. Yeah, which plan are you referring to? Or are you just talking about them in general, Red Napoleon? This is good. Are you there? Oh, in general, okay. Look, I don't like Stalin. I don't really like communism. Socialism, I'm more like lenient toward. But I'm gonna tell this I'll be as impartial as possible when it comes to this, okay? The 5-year plan, yeah, during Stalin. I mean, so you had the first, the third, the second, and the third, I believe. Yeah. So the first two, from 1928 to 1937, they were agriculturally focused. Sorry, they were industrially focused, and they're also agriculturally focused in regard to collectivizing, whereas the third 5-year plan was more about armaments production because they saw the rise of the Germans. Wow, thank you. That's cool, guys. That is sick. Thanks, guys, so much. So the 5-year plans in regard to the societal changes was a disaster. Stalin collectivized too quickly, too forcefully. That led to the Holodomor and the famine in Kazakhstan, which people don't talk about enough. They always talk about the Holodomor, but they don't talk about Kazakhstan. It created too many societal changes. The fact that there were quotas, that the villages, the Kavkazi were running out of supplies and food, forcing the peasants to kind of go into the cities. That creates a lot of social disturbances, right? And the regime was very unforgiving. Like, they really protected the cities during the collectivization process. You know, in cities, they give, like, rationing cards, I believe, whereas with peasants, it was very difficult for them. There were roadblocks to enter cities. So it created a disaster in terms of the society. Also, it created a lot of long-term problems. It didn't really solve the agricultural question in the Soviet Union, which was the Achilles heel, right? That ultimately caused the Soviet Union to collapse because it relied more on food imports, which became unsustainable combined with massive military spending in the 1980s. So that was a huge issue that wasn't resolved. That being said, the 5-year plans were more of a success in terms of industry. Even with the inflated, super optimistic industrial figures that they did actually objectively surpass some of their industrial output figures, So, like, in regard to industrialization, the 5-year plans were success. It's generally agreed upon by most Russian historians. The question is, was it worth it due to the externalities, the negative externalities that it caused? Were the societal was the transformation of the society really a good one? That was caused by the 5-year plans. Was the fact that this created long-term agricultural issues, did it make it worth it? Some people would say yes, it helped the Soviet Union industrialize for World War II, but in my opinion, that's a really bad analysis, because that's speaking from hindsight. Like, did Stalin really envision in 1928 that Germany was gonna dominate Europe and, like, invade the Soviet Union? I think not. So we're really speaking about about the 5-year plans in that regard, through the prism of hindsight or whatever. I hope that answers your question, the Red Napoleon. I'm trying to be as nuanced and as objective as possible. Now, Second City A and B's, my Discord brother, thank you for coming. I have seen The Death of Stalin. I love it. Historically speaking, I know that it has some inaccuracies. It seems like the coup took place in just like a day, even though it was a process of months of infighting. But, like, I know how it happened, the coup, but I don't know the specific details about, like, the day-to-day goings. Like, I know that Beria was screwed over by by Khrushchev and Zhukov and all that with a coup. I totally get that, but, like, it's always a bit of a blur about, like, the chronology of the specific, specifics. Yes, collectivization was a complete theft. And the thing is, collectivization... did that answer your question, Second City, by the way? Because I love that movie. I thought it was so funny. Yeah, objective opinions don't really... but I'm trying to give benefit of the doubt, Like, I know I got a lot of, like, socialists in this channel. I gotta appease you guys. No, I'm joking. I try to... Because me, I'm more right-wing. I'm very aware of my biases. But don't worry, I'm not, like, super right-wing either. So I really try to balance things out, because at the end of the day, I'm doing this channel because I love Russian history, I'm going to treat Russia with respect. I'm not going to try to view it exclusively from the viewpoint of an American. That's why I want to go there. I mean, I have Russian friends. Yeah, collectivization was complete theft, in my opinion. It demonized, like, small business owners, like mom and pops, like kulaks. Like, I get it if you're gonna criticize, like, the Nepmen, who were opportunists, like Nepmen, which were, like, the rising class of, like, traders in the new economic policy period. Those were opportunists, but, like, come on, Russia was a poor country at that time. You had a civil war that happened. Of course, you're gonna have a bit of opportunism, price gouging, and you need regulations. But at the end of the day, like, the circumstances were so horrible. There was a famine in 1924. Of course, people are gonna like look at World War II. Stalin had to ease bartering restrictions, and, like, a bunch of, like, people, like peasants, set up black markets to sell during the Second World War. He had to tolerate it because it was helping answer food supply issues. And, like, people couldn't survive with the price ceilings that were put in place. There were massive shortages, so, let people do what they gotta do. Why is my explanation of Bavagian Creed compared to global Glubokaya Obaratsia wrong. Why is it wrong, Parabellum? And I'm not saying that in a sarcastic way. I'm genuinely curious about why it should be wrong. Oh, speaking of another negative comment, someone... Nasally weasel-esque hand rubbing. I love YouTube comments, honestly. But that's what I said. That's what I put in my videos. In my Operation Bagration Part 1 video, that's exactly what I stated. Did you see that video, or did you maybe see one of my older videos? No, Michael, I don't mind touching modern geopolitics in Russia because that's what I studied, and I love it. It's just I haven't had... I'm trying to be chronological with my Russian history videos. I'm trying to really cover the medieval Russian period as much as I can, and World War II, the Russian Civil War periods, before I go into the modern period, because I really want my subscribers, including myself, because I learn every day, I want everyone to have a really good understanding of, like, how we got to today. Like, how did we get someone like Putin and stuff. And I can go over, like, the federal districts in Russia, how Putin appoints the governors for the federal districts, the 2003-2004 law on political parties. I can go into all of that. I love that, but I just want to get there slowly. Parabellum, yeah, my oldest video on Bavagenskrieg and, like, Deep Battle is a bit, like, it's not... I'm not going to say it's inaccurate, but it's not super accurate. It's not that detailed. I would implore you to watch Operation Bagration Part 1. I explain it a lot further with the writings of Tukachevsky, Triandafilov, and Iserson. Yeah, that video, that's, that video, yeah, that video, I hope I don't give the impression that I'm saying that Russian, doctrine is trying to be tactical, because that's not what I meant. Like, I'm not trying to give the impression that Russian doctrine is tactical. I don't think it's tactical at all. I think it's strategic, like you said. Completely agree with you, actually. But I go into more detail. That video was more like improvised. It's kind of like this video, you know. It was kind of like a live stream that was recorded. But if you really want me to, if you want to see my specific analysis, watch Operation Bagration Part 1, because that completely covers, at least to the best of my knowledge, the doctrines, right? And I use a lot of U.S. military research. I use a lot of, like there's a Ukrainian general that puts it really succinctly. German doctrine, some people will even say German doctrine didn't even exist, but I'm not going to get into that. But German doctrine really focused on mechanized penetrations. Yeah, I'm really bad with the Russian terms because I don't speak it. But German doctrine was really mechanized penetrations, whereas Russian doctrine was focused on infantry penetrations and then mechanized exploitations, which is the difference. So Germans would penetrate using tanks and armor first, followed by mechanized infantry and stuff like that. Russians did the opposite. They would do a rolling artillery barrage with infantry doing the penetration, and as soon as there was a gap, they would go in. the infantry that would attack would be like the shock armies and stuff like that. But you're absolutely right. Like I said, sometimes I just do improvise stuff. Yeah, Schwerpunkt. Again, German doctrine, I don't really focus on it too much. That being said, not everything the Germans did was bad. Like, in my most popular video, like, the German conscription system influenced the outcome of World War II in a way, you know. So the Germans did do certain things that were right. It's just in terms of doctrine, I don't think it was up to date at that point. Oh, Scary Bird is back. All right, cool. Anybody else have any more questions? How long has this been? How long have we been doing this? About an hour. A little bit less than an hour. Cool. Because I think I've covered everything. So, you know, Bagration series. I'm moving back to France. I'm hopefully going to make a video this summer. Oh my god. You're I'm getting lost with the... I'm sorry. When it comes to, like, the terminology, I get lost. Yeah, the outcome of the mission. Yeah. So mission type. Yeah, of course. Yeah, Germans really focused on encircling as much as possible, really. Whereas the Soviets really, they wanted to contain the encirclements, but they really wanted to target, like, infrastructure, lines of communication, things like that. Tukachevsky question up in chat. Oh, sorry about that, Red Napoleon. Oh my god, he was pagan and anti-Soviet. I have no idea. I haven't really read his biographies. Was he really wrong in the... I think Stalin... I do think he was a scapegoat. Because I really don't think... I don't think there was a fifth column in the Soviet Union. Like, and the people justify the purges saying that, oh, if they hadn't happened during World War II, we would have had a fifth column, and, like, you know, we'd be destroyed. The main issue with that is that World War II was a war of nationalism, right? The Stalinist regime didn't emphasize communist ideology during the war. You see that with a lot of the films that they produced that emphasized Russianness, right? So, like, in World War II, it was really about a war of the Russian people. You know, that's why they call it the Great Patriotic War. When they say the Great Patriotic War, they don't mean patriotism to Leninism, Marxist-Leninism. They mean patriotism to the motherland, to Russia, to Russian values. That's why they kind of relaxed restrictions on religion. They brought back imagery from the Orthodox Church and stuff like that. And here's an important thing. Denikin, right? Denikin, who was alive till 1947, the main leader of the white movement, right? He actually offered his support to Stalin during the Second World War. So even the ferocious opponent to Stalin, sorry if there's background noise, even the most ferocious opponent to Stalin from the Russian Civil War sided with him during the German invasion. You know, he offered his support. So I think it's a bit of a myth about the fifth column. Yeah, I know TIK. He knows me. I've known TIK since he had 7,000 subscribers. I had like 300, and we would comment on each other's videos a lot. But sure, leave a link in the community post that I made, okay, Parabellum? I made a community post about today's stream. You can just leave a link to the video there. Or just leave a comment and I'll see your channel. I haven't covered the Battle of Khalkhin Gol. I've mentioned it, when I had that interview with Professor Richard Tempest. I am going to cover it maybe in the future, but I just, like I said, my stream of videos is just not, like, I don't produce videos in enough quantity to really justify diverting from the Operation Bagration series right now. I want to at least continue the series and try to, produce things here and there. That's why I'm trying to produce these live streams, because it's a way of me keeping you all in the loop, helping the channel expand, whilst focusing on more tedious videos, that are harder to produce. Okay? All right, any wrap-up questions? Because I think that was a pretty good Bagration Power Hour. Did you guys enjoy that? I think we covered a lot of topics today. Covered a lot today, actually. Any questions? I'm not done with Bagration. Are you kidding me? This Bagration documentary series is gonna be honestly at least like an hour and a half at this rate. Like I've already done 30 minutes, and I haven't really covered the series itself. No, I haven't seen the video on in Italian Libyan oil. Like I said, like World War II, I love talking about it, but like it's not the only thing about Russia. That's the thing I want to talk about. Russian history isn't just the Second World War. It's so much more. So like I love talking about World War II, but I don't want to make this channel just another World War II channel. I want to give the viewer a good grasp, at least as far as my understanding goes, of how Russia is Russia, why Russia is Russia, and how Russia might be. I don't know. All right, everyone. That was excellent, actually. I feel like I really covered a lot with this. It was quite concrete and really nice questions. Thank you so much to the Red Napoleon and to Second Cities, AMVs, for donating. Really appreciate that, guys. And yes, I like Kievan Rus. That's true. And Parabellum, put your video and we'll be in touch, man. Like, greetings from England, where I am right now. Thanks for viewing my videos. All right. Bye, everyone.